Russell, did you really just say there wasn't any luck involved in getting
Uh,
you here?
I do. I do believe that I got here without any luck. I believe I got here with my strategic play.
Okay. Well, that I was just double checking.
So that comment from Russell, that is complete bullshit. And now I'm gonna tell you why. All right, what's up, y'all? It's Hayes, and I'm here. We're gonna be touching upon luck and Survivor. Now, as that last clip showed, there is present luck in Survivor, and as opposed to what Russell might think, it is pretty much impossible to eliminate it completely. And I'm gonna touch upon, why that is and what that means. So as a reason to kind of making this, mostly just like there's a lot of kind of in-depth looks at certain aspects of Survivor. Could be cast, twist, who's the best player of all time, what's the most important skill set in Survivor, all of these things. But through all of this like analytical content, I haven't seen anything really going in depth about luck. And this is kind of meant to overlap, overarch what luck means, how it's involved, that sort of thing. This isn't meant to, objectively say that Survivor is a luck-filled game, because it mostly isn't. But there are a lot of things out of your control that will happen to you in terms of playing Survivor. So I'm gonna be touching upon three kind of main overall points. But there are lots of little smaller things I probably won't be able to cover or probably won't think of. That's apparent, it's such a big, vast game with a lot of big, big, vast ideas about it. It's a very deep game, very much going on. So, you know, not everything's gonna be covered. If there's something you notice that's luck related that I don't touch on, please by all means send a comment and like let let me know or kind of just explain what you mean by that, etc. I would love to see that honestly. And like I don't expect to fully touch upon every little aspect of or not aspect every little instance of luck in Survivor. But without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing is with challenges. So this is kind of like the least or lesser of the three, just in the sense of it's both in the luck involved and also just in the impact. Just in the sense of you know challenges don't mean everything in a season. Um, you know, you don't inherently win Survivor over challenges most of the time. They can kind of involve people going on streaks, etc. And in the other way around, there are a lot of kind of similarities with types of challenges at certain points. It's not always certain, and that's kind of one of my main points. But there's different types that prefer certain people, certain body types, certain attribute types, certain like puzzle making skills, balance, strength, stuff like that. And this kind of can be involved in online spaces or when you're going on the show and the actual reality TV product. But yeah, there are a lot of things that will generally help you be successful in challenges. But ultimately, my main point with this is that it's never certain. You never come into Survivor knowing what challenge you will see at what point. You can kind of, gauge from previous seasons, gauge what you might see, what you think you will see, but most of the time, it will not be certain. You will not be certain. And you can kind of make guesswork, but it's not going to be a for sure foregone conclusion. And with this, there are a lot of Survivor like games that play out where the kind of, I guess, like final six-ish on, I'd say. Immunity challenges mean a lot, but they don't always play, the same types. You can't always predict, obviously. They'll kind of switch it up season to season a decent bit. And in that sense, getting one wrong challenge in a certain spot can kind of mess you up. Regardless of the position you're in, you can try to prevent this, but it's not always going to happen. I guess with New Era, they have kind of brought back, a lot of previous challenges and kind of reused similar things for like Final Four challenge, for example. Like they do Submotion, I want to say a decent bit. Similar types of challenges with that, but like you can't come into a season knowing that it's going to be this at Final Four, And I do want to provide an example of this, a very present example of luck involved with a challenge run. And, the main thing that comes to mind is Terry at Final Four in Panama, which I can only describe as the the worst possible challenge draw for him specifically in the scenario he's in the circumstance. Now, there is, a significant ploy of, Terry got similar style challenges that helped him to get up to this point. But in the situation of Panama, the challenge involved legit just balancing on small platforms in the water. And this is kind of just funny, Terry's just a muscular older man on this cast, and the people he's around are this is Final Three, actually, never mind, not Final Four. The people he's around are is Danielle, who is just a smaller fit woman that's always going to do good on challenges of this nature. And then also Aris, who's literally just a yoga instructor. So, I mean, I think it's funny that this is, the challenge draw that he gets, and a challenge where he is so disadvantaged. It is, like, genuinely laughable. And as such, he doesn't, he doesn't have it in him to beat. And I didn't say before, but this involves tribal challenges and merge challenges, in the sense of, when you are split on tribes, what kind of challenges you will get in the tribal cycle of the game do matter. You could get only challenges that don't cater to your tribe's skill set, as opposed to if you got a different type of challenge, you might be more successful. And that means, you're going to tribal less pre-merge, which, was helpful. And we'll kind of get back into that kind of thing later. But that's also a big thing. It matters in both stages of the game, especially. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of ways it could go. A lot of, things that could happen as a result of challenges and different challenge draws being drawn at specific times. Now, the next thing, overarching, is going to be the format of every season of Survivor. So every season of Survivor kind of has a rough format of, how it will go, what kind of twists are involved, stuff like that. And it depends season to season. It's very much always like a little bit different every time. It could be things with no advantages, just full old school, no like advantages, no finding, stuff like that. It could be the version with the god idol, which is overpowered, that you can use after the votes. Idol hunts with like clues and such, or just you stumbling upon an idol. Kind of heavy advantage games. Could have a currency system, like with fire tokens, ways to earn them, and then like a kind of small shop. Could have exile islands, and you have to play around that, who you send versus who you kind of keep away when exile is kind of hiding something. And then recently with Journeys, the concept of having all three of the tribes kind of meet together, make some unified decision, and that can usually result in some kind of risk your vote situation for an advantage. And then continuing new era stuff, there's like stuff like Beware, you having this advantage hunt, but you have to do something or else you lose your vote. Do or Die, which, just kind of is how it works. It's just people selected, and they they have a chance of just going out of the game completely. And then recently we had Hourglass, which is just flipping the results of of a merge immunity. In addition, tribe makeups and tribe swaps. This could be seasons with 4 tribes of 5, something of that nature. 3 tribes of 6 or 7 starting out. 2 larger tribes, and then also when tribe swaps happen. They won't happen at the same point every season, just about. They could happen here. They could increase the tribes. They could decrease the tribes, stuff like that. Decrease the numbers on the tribes. And they're kind of just shocking. We've had twists before where it's like you send over 2 people to the other tribe, something similar. One person goes with an advantage that we saw a couple seasons ago. Things like that. There's a lot of circumstantial tribe swaps. Stuff like that. And then tribe makeup of just like how many people are on a tribe, what people are on this tribe, what can they benefit off of. And then lastly, we can kind of touch upon overarching kind of season themes and overarching season twists. And those are usually similar. There's casting twists, stuff like Blood versus Water, stuff like Cook Islands and Panama kind of fit into this. Amazon had a promoted, men versus women kind of dynamic and kind of rough theming around it. There's stuff like Edge of Extinction, where you have kind of a battle back competition at these certain points. You have, like I said, Blood versus Water. You have All Stars, which involves a whole lot of certain pregame connections. You have half returnee or captain seasons, where those kind of dynamics play into things in interesting ways that you typically as a player can't fully account for. Not lesser so on All Stars, but more on seasons with returnees, with things like this. And then further casting, they have stuff like Brains versus Brawn. You have or things like blue collar, no collar, red collar, those type things. Those are lesser, but they still have some dynamics involved. It's a lot more perception based of kind of what you want to represent in a season. Basically, it kind of plays into that motion. And then a lot of things of and then the last one, kind of just forced Final Four fire making. That kind of changes things, as well as if you're playing a Final 2 or a Final 3. Lately in Survivor, they haven't done a Final 2 in a very long time. That's likely to stay. That's very likely something that's not going to change. But the chance is never 0, so it's always that kind of notion as well. And then with forced fire making as well. That's something that was kind of sprung up upon in the last couple seasons, but it's still present, and it still changes how you have to play the end game. And all of these a lot of these kind of skew with New School, with them trying all of these new game breaking twists. A lot of them kind of don't work, and a lot of them are just kind of like things that I wouldn't say tarnish, but just kind of make the game a lot more luck dependent, honestly. But yeah, we kind of touched upon journeys, this concept of losing your vote potentially, kind of different things. They've had like caged idols, beware advantages, the works, kind of lumped in advantages where it was like the amulets, where these 3 people had advantages that got increased in power if the people got voted out with them or they weren't in the game, stuff like that. And all of this, impacts how you have to play. Because as a Survivor player, you do have to adapt to the twist at hand. You have to stay kind of alert and adaptive to what could be happening at any given time. You could be sprung upon this twist kind of right when it starts. You could be sprung, a little later, kind of not. They might just reveal it at a later point. Stuff can also just come out of nowhere, and that's just a very, very much a luck aspect of that. So yeah. And then this kind of is lumped in with the next point a good bit. We talked about, general themes of seasons, but now we're going to get into by far the biggest instance of luck we have here, and we have the cast. So we just have a cast photo, but yeah, this is by far the biggest. And what's involved with this is that on any season of Survivor, whether it be, online based, whether it's you're applying for the show and you make it, the cast of the season has such a massive impact on how your season can go, what can happen, how you can play, what strategies really can work and can't work, all the works. So, in my opinion, the social concept or the social aspect of Survivor is by far the biggest, by far the most important. And, this kind of involves, you being able to form relationships with these people. You being able to have a strong social standing, be liked by enough people out there so that they can vote for you in the end, or that you have these alliances that will carry you further. And objectively, different people will gel with the cast they're on in different ways. And this can be, a big concept of luck. There's people that can gel with most cast, but presumably not all cast. And that's fine. There's people that are social butterflies that will adapt to any situation. And there's people that will be able to play better on certain cast styles with certain people, and stuff like that. It kind of, depends a good bit on how your run can go. If there's people that will just really adamantly dislike you, things like that. Again, there's someone can just be adeptly social with everyone, but that's very rare. There's often times where people are best suited on in a certain group setting. And that's what we have here. So we did talk about casting twists generally, with, blood versus water is a big one. You're playing with a parent partner. That's the general cast of season. Everyone is playing with those partners. That dynamic matters a lot. You can have, someone that isn't very into the game. You can have someone that kind of just harms you, even though you're kind of playing differently than them, stuff like that. Panama and Cook Islands are other ones with like smaller cast twists that do impact everything, but ultimately, that's the big thing. It is probably the biggest instance of luck because it is presently the thing you have the least control over. Everything else you can kind of adapt and change as you go, or kind of change your style of thinking. This, you can still do that, but it's a set upon thing, kind of, where, these people aren't changing, and you can't really plan for the kind of people you'll be around on, like, most given circumstances. So that's kind of just why I believe, casting to be, the biggest instance of luck you have. Because in a sense, it matters so much to how you're able to play Survivor, how you're able to be viewed socially, what kind of impact you're able to have. And it also just, it involves all facets. There are certain people that will be more susceptible to lying and manipulative kinds of gameplay. There are people that will see right through that. There are people that will play more emotionally. All of those things are involved, and it really kind of dictates what strategies will work, what strategies won't work, what strategies will be best suited for this game. And then physically, you can kind of do better on, less physical casts, I guess. If someone is just if there's like a grouping of people that kind of are lacking, or vice versa, you can kind of just not rely on challenges. There can be just one tribe that's just stacked physically, that you can't really defeat. Then late game, it can just be someone that's just objectively stronger than everyone else, that kind of thing. It works in all facets, and it matters so much to how you will have to play. But yeah, that's about that's about it for me. Honestly, I really like this concept. I think it's an important thing to look at, when you're kind of analyzing the game of Survivor. It's not like a focal thing. Luck isn't the most pressing factor. And what I like to say is when you're playing, you want to try to play in a way that mitigates luck as much as you possibly can. But I want to make this just to say that you can't always do that. Luck's always going to play some factor, some type of effect on how you have to play. So yeah, if I didn't say before, this video kind of works for both, online reality kind of scene, and also just how the show works, how you would have to play on the island, of course. But yeah, if you made it this far, please consider dropping a like. Really help me out. And I honestly, any suggestions of this kind of video to make, I really like going over stuff like this in great detail, stuff that people might not really think about, and just kind of going into further detail. I love that kind of thing, honestly. If you have any kind of ideas, whatever it will be, honestly, if I think it's cool enough, I would love to talk about it and make this kind of video for it. But yeah, thank y'all so much. Goodbye and peace out.